Okay,
so I want to see that we for the first 14 years of this century, Canada had more American investment than America had Canadian investment. In other words, we were winning the tug of war of capitalism with the greatest capitalist economy the world has ever seen. And then from 2015 to present, there's been a net outflow of $500 billion measured in USD from Canada to the US. It's astonishing.
Since when?
In the last 10 years.
$500 billion.
$500 billion, and that's in American dollars. That's 700-ish billion in Canadian, which is the equivalent of about a quarter of our economy has just left its Canadian investment. I mean, the government admits that the pension funds are now investing in the States. Canadian pension funds, Canadian RRSPs, they're all invested because that's where you get the best return right now. I want to bring that back.
Right. So that's like $40,000 per Canadian, something like that.
That's right. So why don't we can bring that back?
$20,000 per Canadian, $80,000 per family.
But let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Let's make this the best place to get a return on your investment. Let's make this the best place in the world to do business, to bring hundreds of billions of dollars of investment to dig mines, build pipelines, business centers,
drill,
new tech companies, drill, high-tech enterprises that you not only invent here, but you actually keep here, because it's not just a great place to lose money, but a great place to make money. That is the bright, optimistic future I see. I'm looking at models for this. You look at Ireland. Ireland, my grandfather came from Ireland, about half a century ago, because Ireland was too poor. Well, now Ireland's per capita GDP is twice Canada's. They're now $100,000 per capita GDP. In Canada, it's 50,000. So what did the Irish do? They cut taxes. They shrunk government. Government is only 23% of the economy, 40% here.
Right.
And so
they made it tech-friendly.
Made it very tech-friendly. So like 70% of the American, 75% of the Irish economy, is free enterprise. And that's why they're just cooking with gas. Look at Singapore, Switzerland. There are countless, Israel after the 90s becoming a startup nation. The recipe book is already written. We know what to do. Unleash free enterprise, remove the constraints, cut taxes, and allow people to prosper.
Yeah, well, I've heard great things about the tech graduates from the University of Waterloo.
They're phenomenal.
People the people I know in Silicon Valley. Yeah.
They're our biggest export right now.
Yeah, well, they feel that they're the equivalent, at least, of the graduates of the Indian Institute of Technology. And I mean, the Indians have had a massive influence in Silicon Valley. And so Canadians, well, that's only one place where Canadians are not making nearly the use of their resources that they could. That's on the human resource front with regard to engineers.
Well, you think you graduate from Waterloo and you can pay 53% tax in Canada, or 18 or 19 in Texas. You can pay $1.5 million for an average house in Canada, or you can buy a castle for $400,000 in the States. You can make Canadian dollars, which is 69-cent equivalent of the US dollar, or you can make an American dollar. It's unfortunately, the pull is very hard, but why don't we get us pulling in the other direction? Why don't we make this the most attractive place for these brilliant minds to come out of these schools and build it here and keep it here? And I think we can do that.
Okay. So what are you going to do when you take office? Like what does that look like practically? So what could Canadians watch you do in the first months of your administration that would help reassure them that this is going to happen?
This is real. Well, first of all, I'm going to axe the carbon tax. It's been kind of an epic commitment that I've made. It's iconic. And so I have to follow through on it immediately. And that will signal to the country that I'm serious. Second, we want to get rid of the GST on new homes and make pass changes that aggressively incentivize municipalities to get the building started. That has to happen immediately for people to notice any difference in the cost of housing by the time I get through my fourth year. We will have rapid introduction of the biggest crackdown on crime in Canadian history. a massive crackdown.
And what'll that look like? Crackdown on crime?
Basically, habitual offenders will not get out of jail anymore.
Right. 1% of the criminals commit 65% of the crimes.
Is that right?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Well, criminals specialize just like everyone else, right? And the best predictor of offense in the future is repeat offense in the past.
Right.
So
in Vancouver, they had to arrest the same 40 offenders 6,000 times in 1 year.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly a consequence of that specialization.
When we did this last time in the Harper government, we actually reduced crime by 25%. But interesting, this is a very big surprise. Incarcerations went down because the people that we kept in prison were in and out anyway. It was like the Hotel California. They were checking out, but they were never really leaving. So we had to basically save them a bed. But secondly, the small-time offenders were actually deterred. You know, all of the so-called experts say deterrents don't work. No, they do work.
Yeah, the best deterrent turns out to be probability of conviction rather than length of sentence.
And right now, though, it's worse than that. Even if you have a probability of conviction, there's a certainty that there won't be any real penalty.
Right.
So
that's not a real conviction.
That's not a real conviction. There's going to be a very serious crackdown on crime.
Immigration? What's the scoop there?
Oh, we have to slow down the numbers. There's no doubt about it. We have to end the fraud in the international student and the temporary foreign worker program. We have to...
Canada historically had a very effective immigration policy.
We just have to get back to the best system in the world, which we had for 150 years. Even in the United States, both Democrats and Republicans used to say, they'd get up at a microphone and claim they were going to replicate our system because it was an undeniable success. Immigration was not even controversial before Justin Trudeau because it was so well managed here for so long. And we just need to get back to that system.
It was clearly viewed as a net benefit by the immigrants and by Canadians.
Absolutely. In fact, the support for immigration was strongest in kind of the rural, resource and agricultural communities where the labor was most needed and welcomed. And people integrated. They arrived here, and while we said to people, look, bring your traditions and culture and your stories, but leave the problems at the door. And this is, by the way, a history for Canada that goes back hundreds of years. I mean, the Protestants and Catholics were ripping each other's eyeballs out in Europe for centuries. And then they came to Canada and they got along. They ultimately ended up intermarrying and integrating completely. And, whether you were an Orangeman or a Catholic, Irish Catholic, you over time, you got along with your neighbor. And, in the last 9 years, we've seen that's come apart. The foreign conflicts are now spilling onto our streets. I want to put an end to that. I want to say, look, we're not interested in the world's ethno-cultural conflicts. We welcome people.
Shadow side of multiculturalism.
We welcome the people who come from places that have been afflicted by war, as long as they leave the war behind. And frankly, most people come here to get away from those things. So by getting back to a common sense of values and identity and reminding people that when they get here, they are Canadian first, Canada first. Leave the hyphens. We don't need to be a hyphenated society. We need to be...
So we can abandon the post-nationalist state rhetoric and presume that Canada does have a Western identity founded on the a priori principles of Western democracies, and that is a uniting ethos for the people that come here.
And that we owe a debt of gratitude to the giants who came before us, who fought in wars, who laid down a parliamentary democracy, and who left us behind this incredible inheritance. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be grateful again, and we're going to inculcate the values of gratitude for our incredible history, build up the country, celebrate what we have in common rather than obsessing about what divides us, focusing on the shared values that make us all Canadian. And I think in so doing, we can, and by the way, put aside race, this obsession with race that wokeism has reinserted.
Well, invented even.
Invented in many ways.
When I moved to Toronto, it was as race blind as any city could be.
Right.
Right. And that's flipped. And it's flipped because of that obsessive